Ladies and gentlemen, since Money in the Bank is just around the corner, in today's video, we're going to be tier ranking every single Mr. and Miss Money in the Bank in the history of the WWE. And we're going to be tier ranking them from Hall of Fame all the way down to trash. Now, we're going to be using multiple conversation points to make our decisions, like were they the correct winner? Did they have a good run with the briefcase? Did they have a great memorable cash-in? And were they able to catapult their careers off the back of being Mr. or Miss Money in the Bank? All in all, there are a total of 33 separate instances of Money in the Bank briefcase holders, and we're going to be tier ranking every single one of them. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I know that you're going to fall in love with his YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. And don't forget, if you want more than just daily wrestling content, to come over to the Patreon, patreon.com/SantiZap. Over there, you're going to get so much more extra content that never gets uploaded here to YouTube because we use footage over there and it would just get blocked here due to copyright. So come check it out. Link in the description, link in the pinned comment. Let's start ranking things. All right, so before we fully dive in here, let me show you the different tiers that we're going to be using for today's video. So at the very top, we have the Hall of Fame category. This is reserved for the best of the best, the Money in the Bank winners that are enshrined in history for a combination of different reasons, whether they were an excellent winner, maybe they had a great run with the briefcase, creating that awesome identity of Mr. and Miss Money in the Bank. Maybe they had an unforgettable, awesome cash-in, or they were able to catapult their careers to new heights off the back of the Money in the Bank concept. And then we work our way down to the great category, then good, then mad, then at the very bottom, we have the trash category. This is reserved for the worst of the worst. These are the individuals that we wish never won Money in the Bank to begin with, and they did win and would go on to have a bad run or a completely forgettable cash-in, or no cash-in in some cases. So let's go ahead and get started with the first ever Money in the Bank briefcase holder, Edge, who would win at WrestleMania 21 in the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match. At the time, the Money in the Bank briefcase was only at WrestleMania. We didn't have a Money in the Bank pay-per-view, and if you can believe it, we are now at year 20 of the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match. So yeah, Edge was a really interesting case as Mr. Money in the Bank because we didn't really know what this concept would end up being. Most of us just expected this match to be a fancy way to declare a #1 contender. We just sort of expected Edge to be able to say, hey Vince, I want a match at WrestleMania. I want a match at this upcoming pay-per-view, so go ahead and book it. What we got instead was a cash-in that would transcend space and time and completely change how the Money in the Bank concept was viewed by fans. Because the Money in the Bank briefcase, in the blink of an eye, because of Edge, went from being just a traditional #1 contendership match to deciding who is the most dangerous, scariest individual in the WWE, because the power of the briefcase was unstoppable. Because his cash-in was legendary, cashing in on a vulnerable John Cena after he won a hellacious Elimination Chamber match at New Year's Revolution that year. Vince's music would hit. He would tell everybody that the show's not over, that there's still one more match. Edge would go out there, spear Cena, 1, 2, 3, new champion, and we had no idea what the hell just happened because we were sideswiped. Nobody expected that this is how the Money in the Bank concept would work. And from there, me and pretty much all the other fans around the world were hooked with the concept of the Money in the Bank ladder match because, like we said, whoever was holding that briefcase was now the most dangerous person in the entirety of the WWE. So Edge would be a great winner. He'd have a great run with the briefcase with some fun storylines and created a nice identity for himself as Mr. Money in the Bank. He would have an unforgettable cash-in that is still talked about to this day. And because of the back of this cash-in, he would go on to carve out a monumental, legendary Hall of Fame singles career. And it started because of the briefcase. This is about as Hall of Fame as it gets. Hall of Fame. Now let's talk about Rob Van Dam, who won the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 22. And he kind of bucked the trend because from here on, we were just expecting the Money in the Bank briefcase winner to cash in on a vulnerable champion. But that was a very heel thing to do. Rob Van Dam was an uber over babyface and would change how you would cash in. He cashed in by pre-announcing a match well in advance. And nowadays, that's not really seen as a very exciting way to use the briefcase. However, I have to admit, Rob Van Dam did it in an awesome way to create one of the most unforgettable moments in matches in the history of the Ruthless Aggression era in WWE by cashing in on John Cena at ECW's One Night Stand, thus creating one of the most unforgettable matches with one of the rowdiest, angriest, anti anti-WWE, anti-John Cena crowds that I've ever seen. So even though the concept was kind of thrown out the window, he wasn't taking up the advantage of what the briefcase gave you as the briefcase holder, he still created an advantageous position by putting himself in a situation where he had the home field advantage. Now, beyond what happened that one night stand, unfortunately, RVD would not be able to do what Edge did and catapult himself into forever main event status. But still, the situation that this cash-in put us in, that unforgettable ECW one night stand, I'm going to put this into the good category. Now let's talk about the third ever Mr. Money in the Bank. That would be Mr. Kennedy, who would win the briefcase at WrestleMania 23. On top of that, he would hold the briefcase not for very long, and he wouldn't even get to cash it in himself. I know that there's a bunch of stories out there that you can find that are fascinating about him being injured, but actually not being injured and then being forced to relinquish the briefcase, and he would drop the briefcase to Edge. So he never even really got to have an identity as Mr. Money in the Bank. He didn't get to cash in. He didn't get to elevate his career off the back of the Money in the Bank briefcase. I will say the match was fantastic. It was one of the most star-studded Money in the Bank ladder matches of all time. And in my opinion, they picked the right person. He was the perfect character to win the Mr. Money in the Bank title. However, it just didn't go to be the way that we all expected it to be. So unfortunately, Mr. Kennedy does fall into the trash category. We'll be really quick with Edge's second run because he didn't win this briefcase and he only held it for one day and would cash in on an injured Undertaker. So I'm just going to put this into trash as well because he didn't win the briefcase. He didn't have a run with the briefcase. He held it for one day. Successful cash in, sure, but I have to lump it alongside Mr. Kennedy here. Now let's talk about CM Punk, the only two-time back-to-back winner of the Money in the Bank briefcase. He won his first ever Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 24, and he would go on to hold the briefcase for about 90 days. And when you look at the field of that WrestleMania 24 match, CM Punk was the perfect choice. He was so over with the crowd. People wanted to see somebody new, and the briefcase could be used in a perfect way to catapult a brand new face within the main event scene, that being CM Punk. However, unfortunately, I don't really think that this is anywhere near as good as his second run as Mr. Money in the Bank. In his second cash in, he would cash in on a vulnerable Edge on an episode of Monday Night Raw, which is, I guess, poetic in a way because Edge at this point is synonymous with the concept of the Money in the Bank briefcase, having two of the three cash-ins at the time and being involved in the second cash-in ever as well, helping Rob Van Dam win. So at this point, Edge has been involved in every single Money in the Bank cash-in scenario. I'll put this into the meh category, but now let's talk about his second run. CM Punk's second run as Mr. Money in the Bank, winning the briefcase at WrestleMania 25, was so much better than his first time around. Funnily enough, he actually held the briefcase for a decent amount less than the first time around, only holding it for about 60 days. But he would cash in on a vulnerable Jeff Hardy, one of the most popular, most over baby faces in the WWE at the time. I'm telling you, if you were around for 2008, 2009, you can attest to the popularity of Jeff Hardy. It was insane. Jeff Hardy, this beloved crowd favorite, beloved babyface, goes through hell on earth in a match against one of his biggest rivals, Edge, in a ladder match at Extreme Rules. He wins the title, the World Heavyweight Championship. Great celebration, only for CM Punk, a babyface, to come out, attack Jeff Hardy, cash in the briefcase, and win the title, thus cementing Jeff Hardy as an even more awesome over babyface that you just saw get screwed over, but then instantly cementing CM Punk as one of the most dastardly heels in the WWE. And the WWE would brilliantly use this wave of momentum to cement CM Punk as one of the best heels in the WWE at the time and one of the most legendary heel runs that I've ever seen. I have to put this CM Punk one into, I'm like between Hall of Fame and great. I'm going to go into the Hall of Fame category with this one. Jack Swagger, oh God, this is where they started just making some questionable decisions. Jack Swagger won the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 26 entirely way too soon. He was being over pushed at the time. The crowd just was not buying into this. He had a completely forgettable cash-in as well. Can you remember who it was against? I can. It's Chris Jericho, but it's not one of those cash-ins that gets played time after time as this WWE heritage moment. This is a completely forgotten run as Mr. Money in the Bank. And the last last time that we would have a WrestleMania Mr. Money in the Bank, and it's kind of a shame that it ended with a bit of a whimper with Jack Swagger. I'm going to put this into the trash bin. All right, now let's talk about Kane, who won the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match to not be at WrestleMania. This was at Money in the Bank 2010 when they had a SmackDown and a Monday Night Raw Money in the Bank ladder match. Kane would win the SmackDown one in an honestly pretty solid match and completely obliterating any expectation of what being the Money in the Bank briefcase holder meant, because Kane would not really be a Mr. Money in the Bank. He wouldn't create an identity with it, because this man would cash in 49 minutes later, being the first person to ever cash in on the same night. Me personally, I don't love same day cash-ins. I really think that this just sort of burns this really awesome storytelling narrative device for the rest of the year, and you're burning it way too quickly. However, it was shocking to see it the first time around, cashing in on a vulnerable Rey Mysterio, who obviously was very beloved, because this was the first time this has ever happened, and it was shocking. I will put this into the good category. Now let's talk about The Miz, who also won Money in the Bank in 2010 on the Raw side of things. Here's the thing, The Miz was a weird choice. At the time, all of us expected The Miz to be the first ever failed cash-in in the history of the WWE, especially because at the time the championship was basically being ping-ponged around by John Cena and Randy Orton, and none of us expected The Miz to be able to cash in on either one of those two megastars of the business. And to clarify, the Raw briefcase meant that you could only cash in on the Raw champion. You couldn't cash in on maybe a more vulnerable, weaker champion on Friday Night SmackDown. But listen, even though this was out of nowhere, even though a lot of people didn't love The Miz, this is the reason why The Miz is where he is today in his career. He would create a fantastic identity, an obnoxious identity as Mr. Money in the Bank. At one point, he was Mr. Money in the Bank and the United States champion. And he would have ultimately a successful cash-in against one of those people that we thought it would make it impossible for The Miz to be able to cash in on, because after 127 days as Mr. Money in the Bank, he would cash in successfully on a hurt Randy Orton after a match with Wade Barrett on Monday Night Raw. And from there, he would go on to main event WrestleMania off the back of this victory. He would defeat John Cena at WrestleMania, and he would carve out for himself a historic Hall of Fame WWE career. I'm going to put The Miz into the great category. Daniel Bryan would win the SmackDown Money in the Bank ladder match back in 2011, and he would hold this thing for 154 days. This, kind of similarly to The Miz, was somebody that was kind of seen as a little bit out of left field. WWE hadn't really done a great job at showing us that they really were ever intending to properly push Daniel Bryan at the time. So when he won the briefcase, I thought it was completely out of left field, but I was here for it. Now, Daniel Bryan as Mr. Money in the Bank, when he was holding the thing, they really turned things upside down. Instead of making him one of the most dangerous people in the WWE, they made him kind of bitchmade. He would basically lose every single match as the Mr. Money in the Bank briefcase holder, which is not typically something that you would do for somebody that has an accolade that big and that important. However, off the back of all of these losses, he would actually successfully cash in after a match between The Big Show and Mark Henry at TLC 2011, cashing in on The Big Show, pinning him and becoming your new World Heavyweight Champion. So we created an identity for Daniel Bryan as this loser Money in the Bank briefcase holder, this guy that just was going to fail his cash in, and then he does cash it in, and he cashes it in successfully on another babyface, thus turning heel, and then creating the yes chant, which would then create one of the biggest movements in the history of the WWE with the yes movement that led to WrestleMania 30. It all started here. You can connect the craziness of the Daniel Bryan movement, the authority storyline, how over Daniel Bryan was. It all started with him winning Money in the Bank, being a loser, cashing in successfully, and creating the yes chant. I'm going to put this, funnily enough, into the great category as well. Next, we have Alberto Del Rio. This was an underwhelming choice for the Money in the Bank briefcase because we just sort of went off the back of WWE making new stars with the Money in the Bank briefcase, with the likes of Daniel Bryan, The Miz, CM Punk as well. They tried with Jack Swagger, and in here they went with too safe of a decision. They went with somebody that had already won world championships at this point. point. He'd already won a Royal Rumble. And the crowd wasn't particularly behind Alberto Del Rio either as a babyface or as a heel. But he would go on to win the briefcase. He would, because of the briefcase, be part of the historic moment between John Cena and CM Punk at Money in the Bank, where CM Punk kicked him in the head and then ran out into the arena. Alberto Del Rio never really created this dangerous feeling that he was always ever looming. He did successfully cash in on CM Punk after the whole weird shit with Kevin Nash at SummerSlam in the match against John Cena with Triple H as a special guest referee. The Alberto Del Rio cash-in is one of the reasons why so many people believe that the Summer of Punk was one of the most fumbled storylines that could have been one of the greatest storylines in the history of the WWE. I'm going to put Alberto Del Rio in the I'm between trash and Metro. Trash and Metro, I'll go trash. Now let's talk about Dolph Ziggler, who would be close to running out the clock. This man held the Money in the Bank briefcase for 267 days. And in that time, he did create a great identity as the Mr. Money in the Bank briefcase holder. He had AJ Lee with him, Big E with him. Honestly, it was a good vibe. It was a good time seeing Dolph Ziggler running around with the briefcase. On top of that, this is a guy that so many of us at the time really wanted for WWE to push, and knowing that he had that briefcase in at any moment, the Dolph Ziggler push that so many of us were waiting for could eventually just instantly start, made for Dolph Ziggler being a really memorable Mr. Money in the Bank winner and briefcase holder. And holy hell, the cash-in, one of the greatest cash-ins in the history of the WWE, cashing in on lame ass Alberto Del Rio after suffering an ankle injury against Jack Swagger on the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania. He would cash into a thunderous pop, like literally one of the biggest pops ever in the history of the sport was when Dolph Ziggler would cash in and pin Alberto Del Rio, and they made a struggle, man, because for a second it looked like Dolph Ziggler was actually going to lose to Alberto Del Rio. The only, I guess, downside is that after winning the world championship, he suffered a concussion, which then meant he had to drop the title, and then after that he was never really able to recapture the same magic, and WWE never really tried with Dolph Ziggler ever again. But man, the time that we had him as the Money in the Bank briefcase winner and the cash-in, I'll forever hold near and dear to my heart. That's a Hall of Fame. John Cena won the Money in the Bank ladder match in 2012, and this was annoying as hell. And it was annoying because John Cena is John frickin' Cena. He doesn't need to win these things. John Cena could fart and get a world championship opportunity. So it felt like a wasted year to put this briefcase on somebody that really wasn't made for the Money in the Bank concept. The Money in the Bank concept was really designed to make a new star or to create a shocking moment, and giving this to John Cena really robbed us of any of that, especially because John Cena, with being as good of a babyface as he was never going to cash in, surprisingly, and he didn't. He pre-announced his match 8 days after winning the briefcase, and he would go on to not be able to cash in successfully because the freaking Big Show would end that match, and thus it would be a disqualification. It was a mess. It was a burned briefcase, and unfortunately, it's off the back of one of my favorites of all time, John Cena. This is in the trash, and I would probably say that amongst the ones that I have in the trash, this is the worst of the worst. Damien Sandow. This is a tale of two halves because Damien Sandow had it all, man. He had the crowd behind him. People wanted him to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. He won the Money in the Bank briefcase. Then in his time as Mr. Money in the Bank, 106 days, he was really entertaining with the thing, creating a new custom mahogany leather briefcase that just fit his character so well. But even though he had us, the fans, he never had the actual WWE machine behind him, because he would cash in on what looked like a vulnerable John Cena, only to fail his cash in, unfortunately. And from there, we never really got to see anything else from this man. This man would basically go into obscurity after his failed cash in. But I really love this time. I really love this time as Mr. Money in the Bank. I thought he was really entertaining. He was a great choice to win, and the crowd was behind him. So even though it was a failed cash in, I'm gonna go mad. Now let's talk about Randy Orton. Randy Orton, being the Money in the Bank briefcase winner at Money in the Bank 2013, kind of suffers from the same complaint that I had about John Cena. Like, this guy doesn't need this. However, even though Randy Orton didn't need this, WWE managed to create one of the most heartbreaking moments in the the history of the sport off the back of a dastardly, nonchalant Randy Orton cash-in. Because Randy would only hold this thing for about a month, about 35 days, winning it at Money in the Bank, and then cashing in immediately at SummerSlam at the next pay-per-view after Daniel Bryan, this beloved crowd favorite, was able to defeat clean none other than John freaking Cena to become the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. The moment that fans wanted, we had the confetti, and then Triple H mid-celebration hits him with the pedigree, allowing Randy Orton to cash in, just slithering in, not even having to attack Daniel Bryan, just slides in, pins him, and wins, destroying one of the most beautiful organic moments that WWE had ever created, and in turn, turning it on its head and giving us one of the most heartbreaking moments and still memorable moments in WWE history. The cash-in was brilliant, and it created the domino effect for the Daniel Bryan movement. Daniel Bryan was popular, but after seeing how he got screwed over in this match, after seeing that WWE was not going to give Daniel Bryan an opportunity to win this thing back, after seeing that WWE refused to listen to the fans and give us Daniel Bryan, the crowds took over. They hijacked shows and created the Daniel Bryan WrestleMania 30 moment, the feud against the Authority, and one of the biggest catalysts for all of that was Randy Orton as Mr. Money in the Bank. I feel like a lot of people would be throwing Randy Orton into like the meh category because he held it for 30 days and it was in the grand scheme of things, this is not something that he needed, but the moment that was created because of it, I'm putting in good. Seth Rollins, come on, this is probably the easiest one. Seth Rollins was a great choice to win, a brand new name, a fresh new face that people could really get behind, this new dastardly heel that fit really well with the concept of the Money in the Bank. He was running around with J&J security. He would go on to have, maybe, I would say easily, not everyone agrees, but I would say the greatest cash-in in the history of the WWE, with the heist of the century, cashing in at WrestleMania 31 during the match between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, not after the match, but during the match, during the main event, turning it into a triple threat after 273 days of holding the briefcase and pinning Roman Reigns and giving us one of the most iconic celebrations, the heist of the century. He would go on to become one of the pillars of all of WWE today. Seth Rollins, this absolutely goes into the Hall of Fame. Now we look at Sheamus, and Sheamus held this thing for way longer than any of us wanted. Here's the thing, nobody wanted Sheamus to win this thing, so he immediately loses a lot of points. We all felt that this was a very lazy decision to have Sheamus win the World Heavyweight Championship, especially off the back of the great run and great cash-in that we had from Seth Rollins, the creation of a new star. So Sheamus immediately started below the regular pecking order, as fans didn't really want to see this. But then the run was pretty forgettable. The cash-in, funnily enough, became a little bit of a crowd favorite moment because so many people did not like Roman Reigns, and Roman Reigns would go on to win the WWE World Championship at Survivor Series that year, only for Sheamus to come out and cash in on Roman Reigns. So it was this like bittersweet moment where like, we don't really want to see Sheamus as world champion, but it's kind of awesome that Roman Reigns' championship run has once again been delayed and pushed back once again. I'll put Sheamus into meh. Now let's talk about Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose would be one of those same night cash-ins, just like Kane was, but I feel like the same day cash-in is far more memorable than Kane's. He would win the briefcase. He was the guy we all wanted. So right away, check mark for being the correct choice and being a great winner. He didn't really get to have a run with the briefcase because he would cash in on the same night, but he would cash in on a night where Seth Rollins would defeat Roman Reigns for the World Championship, and then immediately Dean Ambrose would cash in on Seth Rollins to also become the World Heavyweight Champion. So if you're keeping track of the World Championship and how it's bounced from place to place during this like 5-minute sequence, all three members of the Shield became WWE champions in that stretch of time. So it is a really iconic moment. Based on like how he was treated afterwards, yeah, he would go on to hold the WWE Championship for a decent amount of time. He would kind of become like a cornerstone of the WWE mid-card as well. And then after leaving the WWE would become like the cornerstone of AEW. I know people don't love him as champion right now, but he is one of the faces of AEW and one of the biggest, most recognizable recognizable names in professional wrestling, and this was certainly one of the big moments that helped create that. I'm going to put this into the great category. Me personally, I'm a sucker for something poetic. I'm a sucker for the idea that all three members of the Shield were world champions because of this moment. Now let's talk about Carmella. The women have entered the equation, as Carmella was the first ever women's Money in the Bank briefcase holder. She won the briefcase at Money in the Bank 2017. Now, the way that she won is definitely very, very controversial. It's still controversial to this day because in the first ever women's Money in the Bank ladder match, it wasn't Carmella that grabbed the briefcase to win. It was her henchman, the chinless wonder, James Ellsworth, that would go on to grab the briefcase, give it to Carmella, and that gave Carmella the win. It was a bad moment because it meant that in this historic moment in women's wrestling, we have a dude that's like in there involved. They would do it again. They would do a rematch because they knew that this was just a terrible idea and she would win the rematch because of herself, which is good. I'm glad that they ended up retconning that terrible inaugural moment with James Ellsworth. And honestly, Carmella's run as Ms. Money in the Bank, I think might be the best of the women so far to this day, because she really epitomized what the Money in the Bank briefcase was all about and basically kind of followed in the footsteps of Edge, because she also held this thing for a really long time, right down to the wire. 287 days Carmella was running around with the Money in the Bank briefcase. And what I liked about her run is that it wasn't completely full of these fake cash-ins. There were some here or there, these failed attempts, but for the most part, it was out of sight, out of mind, and she created a fun character of Mella. What was it? Mella in the Bank? Yeah, it was Mella in the Bank. So she was a great choice because she was a brand new budding star in the women's division. It wasn't one of the traditional names that you would expect. She had an awesome run with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and her cash-in was fucking fantastic as well, because Carmella would cash in immediately after WrestleMania on a Charlotte Flair who was attacked by a debuting set of the Iconics in Peyton Royce and Billie Kay. They would take out Charlotte Flair, thus opening up the opportunity for Carmella to run down on the top woman of the women's division in Charlotte, cash in one of the most frustrating cash-ins, by the way. You go back and watch this, the ref asks like 70,000 times, "Are you sure?" Which is one of the most annoying tropes in professional wrestling and in the concept of the Money in the Bank briefcase. She would cash in successfully on a Charlotte Flair to become the new Women's SmackDown champion, and all of it, the entire package was perfect. Did they catapult her to forever main event status after that? No, but everything else about Mella in the Bank was genuinely perfect. Like, think about the moment of that cash-in. We have this super like strong, unstoppable Charlotte losing to somebody that in the pecking order is significantly below her in Carmella, and all because of a brand new debuting group. Like, dude, there's just so much awesomeness going on in that cash-in. I have to put Carmella's cash-in in Hall of Fame as well. And now let's talk about the sad case of Baron Corbin. We all know that he would eventually become bum-ass Corbin later on in his career, but I kind of feel like bum-ass Corbin started here in the first place, holding the briefcase for about 58 days and having a failed cash-in, man. Not only did he fail a cash-in, but in the history books, he failed a cash-in against Jinder Mahal, one of the weakest, most vulnerable champions that you could think of, and you failed a cash-in against him. Like, that to me is, I'm sorry, like, there's no salvaging that at all, and Baron Corbin has just never recovered after this. Trash. Now let's talk about Alexa Bliss, who won the 2018 Women's Money in the Bank ladder match and went the route of the same day cash-in, which again, I don't love because it burns that awesome storytelling device. It would have been cool to have that Money in the Bank briefcase in the women's division ever looming. I also would have loved to see what an Alexa Bliss with the Money in the Bank briefcase would look like. I feel like we were robbed of that. I will say I thought that the cash-in was utterly brilliant, though, as she would cash in mid-match again between Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, cash in on Nia Jax, pin her, and become the new WWE Raw Women's Champion. I thought that the cash-in was executed incredibly well. They they picked the perfect person to win the briefcase. The crowd really did love her as a heel at the time. People still obviously still love Alexa Bliss, but her winning the briefcase was just a great idea and a fan-friendly decision for sure. I'll put this into the good category. Now we have Braun Strowman winning the Money in the Bank in 2018, the Monster in the Bank. I despise this. I despise this because Braun Strowman didn't need to win this. I don't even think that he should have been in this match. If you ask me, I feel like if everything was done right, you could have had a main event Braun Strowman without having to go through the Money in the Bank concept. However, they had him win, and then they had him do the most boring thing that you could do: pre-announce the match. He pre-announced his match against Roman Reigns. He cashed in against Roman Reigns, Hell in a Cell 2018, a Hell in a Cell match, and then Brock Lesnar breaks into the cell, destroys everyone, and this ends in a no contest. Okay, all right. A Hell in a Cell match ended in a no contest. Just let that sink in for a second, because everyone always thinks, oh, the Fiend and Seth Rollins, that's what really killed the Hell in a Cell. No, this did it first. What's annoying is that they actually had some really fun teases that would have led to a far more memorable run as Mr. Money in the Bank, but the way that it ended in such a whimper in that Hell in a Cell match, trash. Bayley winning the Money in the Bank briefcase, also a same-day cash-in. At this point, I was just starting to think that WWE just really didn't have much creative juices when it came to the Money in the Bank briefcase existing in the women's ecosystem, because now we've had back-to-back same-night cash-ins for the women's Money in the Bank briefcase holder, as Bayley would win the 2019 edition of the show, and she would hold this thing for an hour and 25 minutes, cashing in also on Charlotte. People just are cashing in on Charlotte left, right, and center. If you go back and watch this cash-in, it's really entertaining. It really is, because she actually went out there as a babyface to help Charlotte, and created this uncomfortable moment between everybody. Bayley took advantage of a situation that she was put in, and we got a thunderous pop out of it. But again, we didn't really get to see what a Money in the Bank briefcase hugger Bayley would look like, even though she was the right choice. Good pop of her winning, and awesome pop of her dethroning Charlotte to become the new women's champion. I'll put this in good, right beside Alexa Bliss. Brock Lesnar, screw this. I hate this so damn much. Oh my God, man. I'm realizing that they really went on a nasty stretch with the men's Money in the Bank briefcase and nearly killed the damn concept, because this was awful. Brock Lesnar wasn't even in the match. I don't understand this. Brock Lesnar was not in the match. 20 minutes into a pretty solid Hell in a Cell match, Brock Lesnar's music hits. He's all of a sudden in the match. He takes up Mustafa Ali, climbs, wins the briefcase by being in the match for 10 seconds. That sucks. Brock Lesnar is also Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar was in everything related to the main event scene at the time. He didn't need the Money in the Bank briefcase to be reinserted back into it. Brock Lesnar's name alone should insert him into the WWE Universal Championship picture. I will say, Brock as the Mr. Money in the Bank alongside Paul Heyman was kind of fun. We got Party Brock going out with the boombox looking Money in the Bank briefcase, doing a little shuffle dance. That literally actually was like the best thing out of this run. The cash-in was also pretty memorable as well, cashing in on Seth Rollins at what was it? At Extreme Rules 2019. But again, even though Brock Lesnar as Money in the Bank, Mr. Money in the Bank was kind of fun with all of the Party Brock stuff, I can't defend this. I can't defend this decision in any way, shape, or form. I'm putting this into the trash. I'm realizing that there are plenty of bad Money in the Bank situations as I'm seeing the board right now. Now let's go to talking about the pandemic era Money in the Bank briefcase holders, and the Asuka situation. I almost don't even want to rank, because Asuka did win the Money in the Bank ladder match where they're climbing Titan towers, and at the very top there's a ring, and then you have to climb a ladder to grab the briefcase. I like that match. I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I appreciated the creativity in WWE trying something new during the pandemic era. I kind of like the match. I like the fact that the women's match and the men's match was happening at the same time. That was also really, really freaking cool. And I love the fact that they chose Asuka to win this. I thought that she was the perfect option to win the Money in the Bank briefcase at this time. You put this on somebody that was established but needed a little bit of an extra boost at the time after losing her winning streak a few years earlier to Charlotte. It kind of ruined a lot of the momentum that she had, but her winning the Money in the Bank briefcase here helped regain some of that lost momentum. momentum. To me, at the time, it was between basically her and Shayna Baszler. I think both would have been fine options, but I was fine with Asuka winning. And like I said, I thought that she won a really entertaining match. But the reason why I have a hard time like pinpointing as to where she should go here is because she didn't really get a run with the briefcase. She didn't really get to cash in. She would win the briefcase, and then the night after on Monday Night Raw, Becky Lynch revealed that she was pregnant and that the women weren't actually fighting for the briefcase. They were fighting for who would be the next Raw Women's Champion. So in essence, she didn't win the Money in the Bank briefcase. She won the Women's Championship. So I don't know, fellas, like what do we create a different category here? Because I don't know that she really belongs anywhere, because she didn't really win the Money in the Bank briefcase, like when you really analyze it. I guess I'll go into meh, because the circumstances did mean that we lost out on the concept of a Money in the Bank briefcase holder once again in the women's division. We won't have somebody running around with that Money in the Bank briefcase being this dangerous woman that could cash in at any moment throughout the year. We didn't get to create storylines out of it, and that's now like 3 years in a row basically between Asuka, Bayley, and Alexa Bliss. But it was circumstantial, right? The circumstances basically forced for this to be the situation, and I can't really put that into the trash bin. I'll put it in meh. Otis, on the other hand, I thought it was out of left field, way too out of left field. I like crazy decisions, all right? I love when WWE wants to experiment with new people, but Otis, that wasn't it. That was not the experiment that they needed to go with, and clearly after the decision was made for him to win the Pandemic Money in the Bank ladder match in Titan Towers, somebody sobered up over there and said, nah, we can't do this. Let's take the briefcase off of him, because he would actually go on to lose the briefcase to The Miz. So just like Mr. Kennedy, he never actually got to cash in. Trash. So he would lose the championship to The Miz, and The Miz would actually hold this thing for like a decent amount of time during the pandemic Thunderdome era. He would hold this thing for about 120 days, and he was entertaining with it. It brought me back in time to the time when he originally won the briefcase in 2010. It was a nice little vortex. Instead of running around with Alex Riley, he was running around with Johnny Nitro, and he had this fun thing going on with Bobby Lashley where he made a deal with Bobby, where Bobby would take out McIntyre. He would cash in on McIntyre, but then would have to give a championship opportunity to Bobby Lashley afterwards. He didn't hold the title for very long, but I kind of liked what they did with it. It was a creative way to ultimately put the title on Bobby Lashley, who should have been the one holding the title at this time. So I'll put this into the meh category. Now let's talk about Nikki ASH, who would cash in not on the same night, but still basically within 24 hours. She cashed in the night after on Monday Night Raw. So once again, no women's briefcase holder in the division telling a storyline and using this as a fun feud creating plot device at all. We burned it again. For some reason, WWE and the women's Money in the Bank briefcase, they just like didn't know what to frickin' do with it. Now, Nikki ASH, kind of like Otis, was a really out of left field choice. I was not on board with it. I would say that most people at the time weren't on board with it. But again, I can appreciate WWE trying with somebody new, and they had them try, and this time, unlike Otis, actually succeed in cashing in once again on Charlotte, who seems to just be the victim of the Money in the Bank concept. But her time as champion didn't really do much for her career either. She was not really able to elevate herself from there. I feel like she was always just sort of hindered with a low ceiling because of the superhero, almost a superhero gimmick. I don't mind Nikki ASH. I really, really don't. But I just don't feel like this was the right choice. This was too wild of an experimentation. I'll go meh. Big E, this was a fun one. Unlike with Nikki ASH, where they went with somebody like completely out of left field that nobody was expecting, they went with the right choice, the obvious choice to win the Money in the Bank briefcase this year in Big E. People love Big E. People were wanting Big E to be able to take that next step into the main event, and ultimately with the briefcase, it gave WWE the catalyst to be able to start that push into the main event that we all wanted. He didn't really get to make an identity for very long. He only held this thing for about 2 pay-per-view cycles. He didn't get to cash in at a pay-per-view. He did it on Monday Night Raw on a vulnerable Bobby Lashley, which honestly I didn't hate. I would put this into the good category. There's not much creativity to it, nothing that's like super memorable, but there's literally nothing to dislike about this. They made the right choice. He cashed in successfully, and they made a main event star out of it, even of course, even if it didn't end up being this long-lasting time in the main event scene due to his injury. Liv Morgan, oh my God, another same-day cash-in. Let's go ahead and go back in time real quick. So how many women is that? The WWE has completely burned the concept of having the briefcase in the division. So that's Alexa Bliss, Bayley, both same-night cash-ins. Asuka getting the championship the day after. Nikki ASH cashing in the day after. And now Liv Morgan. Here's the thing. I love this same-day cash-in. I loved it because I love the idea that they, again, created a new star, trying somebody new, somebody that people were getting really behind at the time, but they did it in a way where they had her cash in on a babyface, a Ronda Rousey that nobody liked. Everyone wanted to see Ronda Rousey lose. People were sick and tired of Ronda Rousey, so she cashed in on the same night against a champion that none of us wanted to see as champion, and that instantly made Liv Morgan the most popular person in the world because everyone was behind the idea of maybe not necessarily Liv Morgan as champion, but Ronda Rousey not as champion anymore. I say that people were more focused and happy about the idea of Ronda Rousey not as champion over Liv Morgan as champion because Liv Morgan was still an unknown commodity, right? She wasn't as popular as she is right now, but we were ready to experiment and try with a brand new person than have to deal with Ronda Rousey anymore. However, go back and watch that cash-in. It's one of the most stressful cash-ins since Dolph Ziggler. That cash-in like raised my blood pressure to levels of danger because she went out there and instantly got put into an ankle lock by Ronda Rousey, and I legitimately thought that was it, that she was not going to be able to get out of that situation as champion. She did take out Ronda's knee that was vulnerable because of that match and was able to roll her up. It was very much a non-dominant win. You know, she really got out of there by the skin of her teeth. But again, at least it was Ronda Rousey losing, which is what everybody wanted. So I will put this into the good category. Austin Theory. I don't even know what to say here, man. Austin Theory is such an interesting scenario. Like, you can make a fascinating case study about the career of Austin Theory, how it's been so up and down, how he just got pushed to the moon way too early. This man wasn't even scheduled to be in the Money in the Bank ladder match, gets put in last minute. He wins the damn thing. And we just think, all right, well, I guess this is the new star that they're making, considering WWE before the Money in the Bank briefcase victory had already been pushing Austin Theory quite hard. But then he would go on to win the briefcase. He'd create an interesting identity as the briefcase holder. I think that he was a great character with the briefcase, but then he was just seen as the most vulnerable Money in the Bank briefcase holder in recent memory because the champion at the time was none other than Roman freaking Reigns. Not only Roman Reigns, but a Roman Reigns holding both sets of world titles, and nobody ever once thought that Austin Theory was a danger to one of the most dominant champions in the history of our sport, Roman Reigns. They did a bunch of fake cash-ins during Roman's matches that prevented Austin Theory from ultimately being able to cash in, but even when he ran out there, nobody thought that he was a danger. It became too much of a comedy act, and ultimately he would try and cash in, not on the World Championship because that was a dead end. He cashed in on the United States Championship being held by Seth Rollins, so that already knocks this down, not just a peg, but like a lot, like right down to the gutter, and he failed his cash in. He failed to cash in on a lesser championship. That killed Austin Theory, by the way. He has not recovered from this moment at all. He has been on an uphill battle trying to regain whatever ounce of credibility that he had after the Money in the Bank debacle. This has to go into the trash category. Io Sky, she was a crowd favorite to win the Money in the Bank briefcase, and I'm so glad that they ended up going with Io. I'm so glad that they actually had Io hold the thing for more than a day. She was at this time since Carmella, the longest reigning Miss Money in the Bank, if you can believe it, at a whole whopping 35 days. 35 days of holding the briefcase is long enough to make Io Sky at this time the second longest reigning Miss Money in the Bank. But hey, her cashing in on Bianca Belair at SummerSlam, I thought was a brilliant decision. She got the cash in after the Bianca Belair Charlotte match. That was a pretty solid match. And then to bookend adding Io Sky's cash in, made just for such a great moment. And honestly, off the back of this cash in, albeit the reign was short. The cash-in was memorable. The championship reign that followed was, lengthy, long, and now off the back of the start of here, her first like main event run proper, she is now one of the most popular women in the WWE. Even though she only held it for 35 days, I'll go great with you. Damian Priest, holy hell, man. I don't even know where to start here. Damian Priest might be the worst Money in the Bank briefcase holder of all time, but his cash-in is one of the best of all time. So this really puts me in a bit of a jam. I like the fact, even though LA Knight should have won that Money in the Bank ladder match, that they went with a new potential top player in the main event scene by going with Damian Priest. I appreciate that. I've said this numerous times. I like when WWE tries to make a new star out of the Money in the Bank concept, and they did. Ultimately, like when you look at once the dust settled, the Money in the Bank concept worked wonders for Damian Priest. But go back, man, and watch his run as Mr. Money in the Bank, and it is one of the most infuriating times to see somebody running around with the briefcase, because it was just a comedy of errors. They basically turned Damian Priest, Finn Balor, and the Judgment Day into the Three Stooges, with constant failed attempts at cash-ins, constant failed attempts at helping Finn Balor with the briefcase. It just didn't work. I'm a big believer with the briefcase, out of sight, out of mind. Just, hey, let this guy run around with it, and when it's time to unleash the secret weapon, you've triggered my trap card Yu-Gi-Oh style, then you have him or her go out there and shock the world. But Damian Priest, it felt, I'm definitely exaggerating, but it felt like every single week there was a fake failed cash-in that just made Damian Priest frankly look stupid. But then there's the cash-in, right? The cash-in is unforgettable. The cash-in is one of the best of all time. We have the CM Punk attacking Drew McIntyre after Drew McIntyre wins the briefcase. 5 minutes later, he's lost this championship to a Damian Priest who runs down the ramp, cashes in on a Drew McIntyre that got his ass kicked by CM Punk to win the championship at WrestleMania. That is awesome. What a great way to bookend a horrible run as Mr. Senor Money in the Bank. So I'm a little bit conflicted. So here's the thing. I'm just gonna meet you guys in the middle, all right? The run was terrible. The cash-in was amazing. So let's just meet it in the middle and put it into the good category. Let's just throw it there. Tiffany Stratton. Tiffany Stratton's run as Miss Money in the Bank is just Damian Priest's, but in woman form. Tiffany Stratton, during her time as Miss Money in the Bank, was made out to be another buffoon. Maybe not to the levels of bad as Damian Priest, but there were so many moments where it just made Tiffany Stratton look stupid. To be fair, several of these fake cash-ins were plots and plans between her and Nia Jax, and ultimately it ended up being poetic that she ended up cashing in on that Nia Jax that was champion. But here's the thing, all right? She was the best choice, all right? Unlike Damian Priest, people really question Damian Priest even winning the briefcase when you compare it to the other people that were in that match. But Tiffany Stratton, they went with it. They went with the one that we all wanted. That was the crowd choice. So happy that they ended up going with Tiffany Stratton. The Money in the Bank run had some ups and downs, a lot of downs, but it had some really fun stuff as well. Like with her getting her own pink Barbie doll briefcase, she really created a fun identity as Miss Money in the Bank. I just wish that they didn't have so many of these fake failed cash-ins that make them look bad. Ultimately, the cash-in I thought was brilliant. The first episode of Friday Night SmackDown of the new year, she cashes in on Nia Jax, turning babyface in the process. She has really used the springboard of the Money in the Bank briefcase to become one of the top stars in the women's division and is one of the cornerstones of the WWE moving forward. I'm going to put this in great. And Drew McIntyre, let's finish this up, ladies and gentlemen. Another really frustrating Money in the Bank situation here. Drew McIntyre winning the briefcase. I was already a little bit questioning this, considering Drew McIntyre was so busy with CM Punk. I feel like Drew McIntyre didn't need the briefcase to get put into the world championship scene. There were so many other options that people would have preferred, and I was down. I was like, okay, fine. Let's see what this looks like with Drew McIntyre. Only for him to cash in like an hour later in the match between Seth Rollins and Damian Priest. A match, by the way, that wasn't even the main event of that show. well. So he cashed in on a non-main event match, and he failed his cash in because CM Punk screwed him again. And I will forever hate this decision. I know that what they were doing. You know, they were trying to create more of a heated feud between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. But brother, that thing was already a forest fire. That thing was already the best feud in the WWE. Burning the briefcase to elevate the already top feud in the WWE at the time was unnecessary. All you did was burn one of the most fascinating plot devices that you have. And in my opinion, the briefcase was severely missed throughout the rest of the year. Think about how interesting it would have been for Drew McIntyre to be running around with this briefcase when maybe when John Cena turned heel and left Cody Rhodes a bloody mess. Maybe a vulnerable Gunther that was really unsure of himself. What if he had the briefcase right now with a Jey Uso as champion, with a John Cena as champion? Unfortunately, all of those fun scenarios were thrown out the window for the sake of elevating a feud that was already super elevated in the top feud in the WWE. I also have to put this into the trash category. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this video. As you can see, there were a lot more trash bin winners than I thought that there was ultimately going to be. But thank you guys very much for watching this video. This was a long one. Sorry, editor. Goodbye. Get out of here.